Hello, everybody. How is it going? This is Hannah from Salary Transparency. I'm so excited to be joining all of you today in this quick 30-minute workshop that we're going to go through about how to find your market rate. So it is 11:59. I started this a little bit early. All right, still trying to figure this out. I've got this streaming on a couple different places. We've got YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So bear with me as we make sure that I am not hearing myself talking and that there are no delays there. So let's give this about a minute for more people to join. I know some people are joining us from lunch and hopping on. So I want to give them all a little bit of time to join us as well. If you have not joined this webinar by signing up for through a form, make sure that you go to our website. If you go to salarytransparency.com, go to the links page and then click on the virtual workshop. Submit your name and email there because after this workshop, I'm going to be sending you all of these slides, all the resources I'm going to be talking about, as well as a recording of this workshop in case you have to step out early or if you miss anything. So if you have not submitted your email to receive those files and deliverables after this workshop is over, please go to our website, salarytransparency.com, click on the links tab. You'll see a link available for our virtual workshop, our virtual webinar, how to find your market rate, and then just submit your name and email there, and you'll receive all these files and all these to-dos after the workshop is over. All right, so it is 12:01. We have 30 minutes together, so I want to make sure that we get started promptly because we have a lot of content to go over, and then I want to make sure that we leave room for Q&A at the end. So, like I mentioned, we are streaming live on Vimeo, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm going to be keeping an eye on our comments, so if you have any comments throughout, please be sure to add anything in the comment section wherever you're joining us from. If I miss it, please bring that question back towards the end. We're going to do Q&A at the end, and I'm just going to be going through all these different platforms that we're streaming live on to make sure that I don't miss anything. So please don't don't worry if your question's not answered. We can always get to it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Let me just make sure that everything seems like it's going okay everywhere that we are streaming. Seems like everything is good on Facebook. Everything is good on YouTube and everything is good on LinkedIn. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, slide one. So, a quick agenda for y'all. I just want to go through a quick introduction so you all know who I am and why I'm talking to you all about this. As well as that, I want to go over what is your market rate. That is the whole purpose of this workshop, is to help you all find your market rate. But not just that, not just knowing what it is and how to find it, but also the next steps. Now that you know your market rate, what do you do? Do you find a new job? Are you underpaid? What are your next steps? So that's what we're going to be going over in this workshop today. Kicking off with a quick little introduction. So let me just make sure that everything seems like it's going okay. It doesn't seem like the slides are showing on the other platforms. So if you're not seeing those slides, don't worry. I'm going to be just chatting through everything and then we'll be able to send you those slides afterwards. Okay? But if you have any questions, please feel free, like I mentioned, to drop them in the questions below. So, if you all have seen Salary Transparency, as I'm sure you have, you would know who I am. My name is Hannah Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of Salary Transparency. And how I came to be the founder and CEO of Salary Transparency is quite an interesting experience. It's a long story, but to make it into a short format for this workshop, basically, I found out that I was underpaid. Before starting Salary Transparency, I used to be a senior data analyst. I used to work in government contracting in Washington, D.C., which is where I live in the D.C. metro area. And I found out that I was making about $20,000 to $25,000 less than my peers in my area, my industry, my location, my title, all of that. And it was my first experience with being given this information and finding out that I was underpaid. It was my first instance realizing the true value of our compensation and what it means to our work and how important it is. And to me, finding out that I was underpaid translated as also being undervalued, not just in my work, but just in my presence and what I brought to the company. I ended up asking for a raise and was denied. And so I started looking for another job. And when I started looking for another job, the first question that I had from a recruiter was, what are your salary expectations? And in that moment, I just had this light bulb go off. And I realized I can do all the market research I want and come prepared to this conversation, but it's still not enough because I don't know what this company's market rate is. And even though I can do all this to prepare myself, I could still be underpaid because of a lack of transparency. And so I actually ended up getting an offer from that company because instead of giving them my salary expectations, I asked them what the budget was. They told me that the budget was $115,000, which was $25,000 more than I was currently making. I told them that was right in line with my expectations. And sure enough, they made me an offer a couple weeks later for that amount, which I accepted. So all that to say, after I found out I was underpaid and I started making what I was worth, I knew that there was more that had to be done to help not just me figure out my situation, but all of you, all workers, and that there's a general need for transparency above all. Because secrecy makes no sense. Secrecy only benefits employers, transparency benefits all workers, which makes up the majority of the workforce, right? So I created Salary Transparent Street to bring more awareness to pay transparency in different jobs and possibilities, but also to close pay gaps that hinder women, minorities, workers with disabilities, and the LGBTQ plus community. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I created this workshop, to give you all actionable advice and resources to help you make what you deserve and start the new year 2024 fairly compensated. So for this workshop, what you'll need is a pen and paper. You're just going to want to take notes on anything I mention if you would like. You do not have to. We are just going to talk through this for the most part, but I will also be sending you these slides afterwards. If you miss anything for your notes, I'm also going to be sending you a recording of this live webinar in case you missed anything, as well as all the resources that I'm going to mention within this workshop. All right, so feel free to sit back, relax, and listen, or if you want to take notes, pen and paper is just fine. So let's get into it. What is market rate? Market rate, in a boring definition, is the going rate that the employment market is willing to offer for your role. That is the boring definition. It is what you are going to be paid based on a couple of different factors. Now, there are a bunch of different factors that will determine your market rate. I'm going to take a look right now at the comment section because I would like to see if any of you all know what different factors will impact your market rate. What are some things that will determine whether or not you can make more or less at your job, and how those factors determine your pay? So let me take a quick look at the comments. Let's see if we've got anything coming through. Oh, thank you, Uzman, that you can see the slides. I appreciate that. I was kind of worried that people weren't able to see the slides. Location, Levi, absolutely. Location is the number one. Let me make sure that I'm showing these. So we've got location is one of them. Education is another. Years of experience, both direct and indirect. Your total years of experience, and then the years of experience in that specific field or industry or role. Another one that people often forget is company size and industry. Company size and industry are sometimes the most impactful with determining how much you can make. For example, and I'm going to be using this example a lot, so please bear with me, but I used to be a data analyst, so when I think about jobs, data analyst is the number one that comes to mind. But for the example, let's say you're a data analyst. If you work in tech as a data analyst and you go work at a tech company, you can probably guess that you're going to make on the higher end of your pay band, meaning that you can command more because you're in your directly relevant industry. If you work at a really large company in tech, that may or may not mean that you can make more or less. Sometimes small companies allocate larger compensation to compete with larger companies, or they might offer you less but other benefits to make up total compensation. These are all things that you want to be aware of. And on the flip, if you're a data scientist and you work in tech, but you want to work at a marketing company or a creative agency, you're probably going to make less at that company because it's not a directly related industry to your work. Doesn't mean that you can't make what you're worth. It just means that you might make less than if you worked at a directly relevant company. So these are all just things to keep in mind when you're looking at how much you can make, that all these factors are definitely going to impact how much you can command for your role. The other thing that people often ask me is range size. How much should I be estimating that I'm worth? And how do I determine that? I always say when you're looking at your range size, your market rate should be a min to max with no more than a $20,000 difference from that min to max. A perfect example of this is my market rate as a data analyst was $100,000 to $120,000. That was my min to max, not 125, not 130, $20,000 difference. And why that's important is because that $20,000 min-to-max difference is going to give you room to negotiate. So if you go into a job interview and you know that your range is between 100 to 120,000, you can start negotiating at 120,000, and if you have to negotiate down, you'll still fall within your market rate. You're not going to fall in or out of it. Okay, so you want to give yourself that leeway, that $20,000 min-to-max difference, because it will be your savior when it comes to negotiating up or down. All right, now the fun part. How do we find market rate? We know what it is. We know how it applies to us. How do we find it? There are 3 ways that I'm going to walk you through how to find your market rate. The first one beginning with salary databases. There are 2 types of salary databases that I want you all to be looking through: general databases and specific databases. 2 to 3 of each. What is the difference between the 2, you might ask? The first one, a general salary database, is an aggregated database, meaning that it is very robust. It has a lot of data. But because it has so much data, usually if you go look into an Indeed or Glassdoor, for example, and you search data analyst, you're going to get an average number back from the 10,000s plus data points that they have. So it's an aggregated database, not a specific database. So they're going to give you the average. They're probably going to give you a range. They're going to give you maybe how the salary compares to years of experience. That's what a general database is. You can go to Indeed, Glassdoor, Salary.com, PayScale, BLS, OpenComp. These are all just some examples of general databases, but I often recommend go at least 3 to 4 pages deep in Google, looking through every single source you find, because depending on your job title, you may find stronger or weaker information in these databases, depending on how popular your role is or how much data different databases have. So you want to try to find 2 to 3 general databases with really strong, solid information. Now, on the flip, a specific salary database is the opposite of a general one. It is uniquely independent, meaning that if you go to our database, salarytransparency.com, and you go look at the salaries, if you type in data analyst into our search bar, you're going to get a result of every single data analyst or relevant salary that has been submitted. And you can look at that one data point, which will be supported by the specific years of experience, education, industry, sometimes company relevant to that data point. So it's very specific. And the strength of a specific salary database is that you can better compare yourself to other people's salaries. So if you go to Indeed, for example, and you find, that the average that they're giving you for a data analyst is like $100,000, it's very difficult to compare yourself to that data point based on the factors we talked about, right? Location, years of experience, education. Like I mentioned, those are all things that will determine how much you want to make. A specific salary database will help fill in those gaps to make sure that you're comparing yourself to an accurate data point. You don't want to be asking for the top of the range for a job when in reality, based on your location or your years of experience or your education, you fall somewhere else in between. Okay, so you want to try to find 2 to 3 really good data points from a general database and a specific database, and jot those down, write them down, keep them in your notebook, and come back to them later because we're going to go to step 2. Okay. And before we move to step 2, I just want to touch on the specific databases here that I listed. We have salarytransparency.com, but we also have a tech database, a creatives database. These are industry specific databases. So if you can't find individual databases, you can look at industry. If you work for the government, salaries are already publicly listed. So go to the public government, like go to virginia.gov and look at the salaries there. Those are actually listed salaries provided by the government. So those are really great ways to compare yourself. There's also built in, which is I believe a more tech specific database, but you, like I mentioned, you want to go like 3 to 4 pages deep in Google looking through all the different resources there are, because there are a ton. All right. Moving on to the second way that you can find your market rate. So we went through the first one, the salary databases. You're going to go find those data points, jot them down in your notebook, and come back to them after moving to step 2. Step 2 is networking. I know people don't like networking, especially when it comes to pay and asking others how much they make. But networking, I believe, can be one of the strongest pieces of data that you can use to find your market rate and how much you deserve to make. My stipulation here is that you always want to ask more than one person. Like we're looking at 2 to 3 data points in our general and specific databases, we're also going to be asking more than one person in your network. And why do we do this? Well, imagine you ask John how much he makes, and he is more than happy to tell you. He is an open book. He's seen salary transparency, okay? He's with it. He tells you how much he makes. That is amazing. You have a transparent salary. But what if John is underpaid and doesn't know it yet? If you rely on that one data point from John without knowing that he's underpaid, you have automatically set yourself back, baselining off of this salary. So you want to ask more than one person, because you might get a ton of different responses from different people. And the more information you get, the better. You don't want to rely on only one person's salary to determine whether or not you're fairly compensated. So how do you do this? You're going to want to ask your coworkers. If you have directly relevant colleagues in your department, on your team, you should be talking to them about compensation. There are ways that you can do this to protect yourself. This is a very difficult and taboo conversation to have, especially when you're talking on company time and property. Company time and property being things that a company could hold against you if they do not want you to have this conversation. If you are not sure if you can legally discuss your salary, please Google the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA. This piece of legislation stipulates that all workers, the majority of workers, not including public workers, farm workers, or railway workers, including, I believe, contractors. If you are not one of these 4 groups of people, a government worker, a railroad worker, a farm worker, or a contractor, you are protected under the National Labor Relations Act, which stipulates that it is your legal protected right to discuss your salary. It is your right. You can have these conversations. However, there are bad actors, and a lot of them being companies. What I mean by that is, even though it could be your legal right to talk about salary, the company could retaliate against you, whether you can have these conversations or not. They don't want you having it on company time or company property. So if you want to talk to your colleagues, I strongly recommend that you take them out to lunch or coffee. If you haven't been to a Capital One Cafe, they are one of our sponsors and a really great place to have conversations, not just about money, but your pay, things going on at work. Just take your colleague out to a place that is not company property and not company time, like lunch or a break, and have those conversations there. You just want to do everything you can to protect yourself, okay? So talk to your coworkers. If you do not have coworkers that you can chat with, or maybe no one on your team that would make sense to get information from, there are other ways that you can network. And the good thing is that the majority of these ones are all virtual. So if talking to people in person makes you nervous, especially talking about pay, I have a solution for you. Go to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an amazing resource. It is literally an encyclopedia, a glossary, a phone book of every single worker, not just in the US, but in most of the working world. Go to LinkedIn, Google or search in the search bar on LinkedIn your job title and your location, and try to connect with as many people that fit your experience as possible. Send them a message and say, hey, I was watching Salary Transparency, and I think I just found out that I'm underpaid. I'm trying to do market research to make sure that I am fairly compensated, and I'm asking a bunch of people in my network. Would you mind having a conversation with me about compensation? And you can chat about it offline, 15-minute phone call. You can talk about it in the DMs. My advice to talking about pay with others, especially strangers, share your salary first. You don't want to be the person asking others to share their salary without contributing your own. So make sure that you are also sharing your salary as a way of good faith, to demonstrate that you are in on this conversation, you've done your research, you are willing to share as well, and that opens the conversation to them to kind of take it where they please, and it shows that there's good faith there. So it'll definitely help you have that conversation. Another way that you can network is on social media. Before I started Salary Transparency and I had already found out I was underpaid, I created a TikTok, and that's how I became a content creator for lack of a better word. I created a social media page talking about all my experiences as a data analyst, more specifically, how much I made in all my roles, how I negotiated, how all the things. And I did that because I knew that it would help others. There are so many people right now on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, that are still in their full-time jobs, but create content on the side about their careers. A lot of times they talk about pay as well. Those are incredible resources that you should be looking for, because if people are already being transparent on social media, you know that they're already going to be open to have that conversation with you if you have questions. It's a lot easier than sending a cold message to someone on LinkedIn or trying to talk to your colleague, Jeff, who you see twice a week in the office, right? Try to leverage social media as much as you can to talk to creators that are already making content about their careers. And last but not least, check salary transparency laws. Let me just check our time. Okay, we are good on time. We're almost there. Check salary transparency laws. There are about 12 states right now that have pay transparency laws. And like I mentioned, this is a link. So if you have not signed up for this workshop, like you did not share your email, please go to salarytransparency.com. Click on the links tab, click on the webinar, and submit your name and email, because I will be sending these slides at the end of this workshop. So make sure that you get this link to the salary transparency laws so you can check whether or not your state has a law or is enacting one in 2024. A lot of states have pending legislation right now that is either in the works or going to activate in 2024. Salary transparency laws are going to solve a lot of these problems because it's going to force companies to share salary ranges within their job listings. So it's going to solve a lot of these problems. If you do not have a salary transparency law in your state, that is okay. There are other things that you can do. My favorite trick is, if you do not have a law in your state, find a state nearby that matches as closely as possible your cost of living, your cost of living, and you're going to want to check the job titles and job openings in that state that has the law, find the listings that share how much people are paying for those roles, and then convert that data to your cost of living. So for example, I live in Northern Virginia. We do not have a pay transparency law here, but New York City and New York State does. New York is a very similar cost of living to the DC metro area, very expensive. So if I was not sure how much I should be making as a data analyst, I would go look at New York City or New York State. I would look for openings for data analysts and data, in similar industry, like in the government or in contracting. I'd try to find those listings and I would convert the salaries that I see listed there to my cost of living. So that way you can find as the most accurate salary as possible without actually having a salary transparency law in your state. And like I mentioned, these are links in the slides that will take you to a blog we have about salary transparency laws across the country, and also this cost of living adjustment calculator. You can also Google these things. It is free information on the internet that you should definitely utilize to make sure that you're being fairly compensated. Okay, those are the 3 ways to find your market rate. So next steps, now what do you do? If you do all this market research and you find out that you are underpaid, there are 2 things you can do. You can ask for a raise, which I think you should do regardless, because you deserve to be fairly compensated, especially if you like where you work. The second thing you can do is leave. And I will say that if you are looking for a substantial increase, like you find out you're underpaid about $20,000 to $25,000 like I was, your current company is less likely to give you an immediate raise that large at once. The reality is that you're probably going to be paid fairly at another company asking for what your true market rate instead of asking to be raised higher than what you currently are. That's just the reality of how things work. But there are different ways that you can negotiate. So I'm going to send these slides after the workshop. You can use our salary negotiation guide to negotiate fair compensation. And also just a few last minute notes as we wrap up here. Please practice pay transparency. I know it's kind of a pun, but paying it forward is truthfully the only way that we can keep this momentum going. If you are watching this workshop because you need help with pay transparency, imagine how you can help other people by being transparent yourself. Other people that are unsure how much they should be making in your role. None of us have this clarity. And so if you think that your salary doesn't make a difference, it truly does. Every single person that we interview on Salary Transparency has made a difference in other people's lives. So please pay it forward. And last but not least, ask for what you deserve. You don't need me to tell you. Please know it internally that you deserve to be fairly compensated. It is point blank, period, the best way to feel respected at work. It improves loyalty. It improves employee morale. You are worth what you deserve. I don't feel like I need to stress that, but if you needed to hear it from anybody, please hear it from me. You deserve it. All right. So that was our workshop. I really hope it was helpful. As I mentioned, if you have not signed up for this workshop and you are tuning in live from LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, no problem. But if you want to get these slides and all the resources I mentioned, please go to our website, salarytransparency.com, go to the links page, click on the webinar link, and sign up with your name and email there so that you're on the list to get the email that I will send in a couple minutes after we wrap this workshop. All right, that was fast. We went through a lot of information. I'm going to go look through these comments and see if you all have any questions. If you have any questions, I will be staying on about 15 to 20 minutes after this, however long we need to be, to make sure that all these questions are answered. All right, so let's go take a look. We are on LinkedIn. Oh, wow, we've got so many comments. Patrick Mahomes crying about the refs. I don't know how that's relevant, but he did throw a little bit of a temper tantrum. Okay. Oh, that's your name, Al Bundy. That's your name. I'm like, why did he comment that so many times? I'm guessing you are not a Chiefs fan. Do we have any Chiefs fans that are here because of Taylor? Anybody? Just kidding. I'm a Browns fan. My life is hard. Okay. I'm not seeing any comments here. Let's see, we had some messages retracted. So I think that means I hopefully answered questions there. Let me see. Do we have anything on Facebook? I'm keeping an eye out. Let's see. Justin, to be clear, the requirement is to list salary ranges in job postings, not existing roles. That's not entirely true. Some companies can decide to be internally or externally transparent. So while pay transparency laws do require companies to share salaries in job postings, it also requires them to list it in some states in internal promotions, internal and external transfers, excuse me, postings, and promotions. So certain companies actually do have to list salary ranges within existing jobs within the company if they are doing internal or external transfers or promotions. But please check your company's pay transparency laws because each state is different. That is kind of the problem that we are in right now. But definitely a good resource for you. Oh, we've got a question from Charlene. Okay, what do you do if your company says HR has done their own market rate research but won't share their data and you still feel underpaid? Oh, Charlene, I feel your pain. I hate this talking point from companies when they say, we've done our own market rate research. The truth is that the majority of the time when they do this research and they don't disclose it, it's because it's not done properly. If they wanted to be transparent, that would include sharing their process. And that is the beauty of pay transparency laws, is that a lot of them are also requiring companies to do annual audits that they have to share the results with to the government and share what those what the pay ranges are and what the pay gaps are within their companies. So just I digress, a small point there. But if that is what the company has told you, my advice to you is to reiterate that a lot of market rate research that companies are doing is utilizing data from that already exists, meaning that it's not what's the word, it's not day of data. It is data that was calculated last year. So if you're looking at a market rate that is from last year, you're already looking at an incorrect market rate. You need to be looking at the most recent relevant market rate research. So I would push back and I would say, hey, based on my market research, and please share your resources with them because there are really great resources out there that are day of data. Tell them that you've also done your market research and you still feel like you are not being fairly compensated. Ask them to share their process with you. But I would stress that if a company is telling you these talking points, like we've done the research and you're fairly compensated, but we're not going to share it with you, that is a little red flag that I would just be noting in the back of my head. Do not let them off the hook, though. Keep talking about your pay. Keep asking for a raise, especially end of year. Make a note of when your annual performance review is or quarterly. Anytime you're having a conversation with your manager, make sure that you're bringing up compensation at least a month before then so that you are letting them know, hey, this has not changed. I'm not letting you off the hook. I still want to be fairly compensated. And in the meantime, please start interviewing with other companies because the best way to get paid what you're worth is usually to leave. I hope that answered your question. Question from JW. When the scope of your role exceeds what is traditionally assigned to your title, how do you accurately compare market rates? Gotcha. So for example, if my title is data analyst, but my role also requires me to act as a project manager, front-end developer, etc., which of these competencies do I use to find my market rate? Gotcha. Okay, so if you are in a role right now and you are asked to do things that are outside the scope of your role, utilizing other skills, you should be compensated for that. If you are being compensated for a data analyst role and being asked to do things that a project manager would do or a front-end developer would do, you deserve to be compensated extra for that. So my advice to you is to go take a look at your job description when you were hired or the most recent update of that job description that you can find. Make sure that you can verify that all your responsibilities align directly with your data analyst role. For example, that's the one we're going with. Now, take a look at the responsibilities that you've been asked to do for a project manager or a front-end developer, as the example implied. what are these other skills and responsibilities that you are being asked to do that fall outside of your paid job description and responsibilities, okay? Anything that falls outside of that means that you should be compensated for it. It is not part of your job description. So I would say once you have that information and you know what you're being asked to do outside of your job description, try to find information on the internet, market research, try Googling how much those skills and responsibilities outside of your job description are worth, like coding, or, it's kind of hard to give an example because I'm sure you know your role best, but just make sure that you can try to value how much those skills are worth on an hourly basis. And then you can look at that on an annual basis if you're not paid hourly. But make sure that you can figure out how much that extra work is worth, and then go to the company and say, hey, I am more than happy to help the team and complete these tasks, but this is my job description and what I'm being compensated to do. These extra responsibilities fall outside my job description, meaning it falls outside my pay grade. I would love to help, but can we discuss a compensation increase or some way to make sure that you're being compensated what you're worth? Bring all your research to the table. Make sure you put it in a letter so that it can be documented by HR so that they don't play games with you. But definitely ask to be compensated for it, because if you're doing work outside your job description and what you were hired for, stop doing it. You're giving them free work. Hope that answered your question. All right, Taylor, we've got a question. Advice for how to negotiate a pay raise when their response seems to be raises are low because of economic environment. When salary is not keeping up with inflation, is basically like taking a pay cut. Absolutely, Taylor. Spot on. If you are not receiving a raise, and we all know how inflation is going up and up and up, the economy is very difficult right now. We all know this, but if salary is not keeping up with that, you are taking a pay cut. You should be receiving about a 3 to 5% annual raise increase every single year. If you are not receiving that, you are losing money and basically taking a pay cut. So, if your company is saying that, we're not giving out pay raises because of how the economy is looking, I would stress that the economy reflects on all, including its employees. Don't say it like that, but don't let them off the hook. I would respond to them and say, I completely understand. The economy has been difficult on all of us, and I need to make sure that I am well supported in order to continue doing my role. And you can allude to how what well supported means. But I would say that you should be asking for the raise regardless. And if they still say, well, the economy is difficult, we're not able to do that, that's okay. But then come back to that conversation 2 to 3 months later. If the end of the year is up right now and they are not able to give you a raise, that does not mean that they get to get away with not giving you a raise at all. That just means that they have to wait until the economy gets better to give you a raise. So make sure that you have that conversation with your manager, that it is documented that you had the conversation in December about pay, that it was rejected because of the economy, and tell them that you will be bringing this conversation back up in February or March. And do that. In February or March, come back to your manager and say, hey, I know that we discussed my compensation in December and and the times just didn't match up. Things were not great. I'm back again, and I'd love to ask for my fair raise, and make sure that you're bringing all the different responsibilities and ways you've brought value to the company. Try to get that as data specific as possible, like an X% increase or any type of way that you can validate what you did with data, and an increase or a decrease is the best way to show your value. But do not let them off the hook. Saying that you can't get a raise because of the economy is not a no. It should mean we'll talk about it later. And if the company does not want to talk about it later, well, it wasn't about the economy. They're just bad actors, and you probably don't want to work there. Okay? All right. Let me check if we've got any questions on LinkedIn. Hi, Rowan. How's it going? I'm not sure if you're still here, but I saw your comment. Let's see. Nothing new on Facebook. Okay, we've got some comments on YouTube. I love it. Jose, hi from the Philippines. Hello. Is there a possibility that I can work directly to US companies via remote? Absolutely. Remote jobs are so prevalent. They're a little less prevalent this year than they were last year, but they are definitely possible. I'm not an expert on international work, but I definitely recommend that you don't give up on that idea. The right company is out there and would love to work with you. Um, Let's see, George. Working remotely from Africa is terrible salary rise. I'm sorry. How can you get paid equally as your coworkers in first world countries for equal performance and workload? Love that question. It is definitely one of the things I've heard frequently as an issue that people encounter is the pay versus remote issue. My advice to people, if you work remotely and you aren't sure how much you should be compensated, you should be compensated however much your salary is worth in the company's direct location. And what I mean by that is if you work in Ohio, but your company is based in New York City, you should be compensated based on what New York City pays, not what Ohio pays. And George, I'm definitely sensing that this is your issue, that you are being paid a lower salary compared to where the company is located in the United States. As I mentioned, international pay and jobs, I'm not an expert on it, so I don't want to share anything that is incorrect and maybe how it works. But I would say that you should push back. If you don't feel like you're being fairly compensated working remotely, you should reiterate those thoughts with your employer and ask for a fair raise. Maybe do the research and see what the average pay is for remote workers versus in your area, because you should be compensated enough to be making a fair compensation to your colleagues in the United States. So I would say talk to your manager, tell them what your hesitations, what your issues are, and ask if you can negotiate salary given that information. Okay, let's see, how are we doing on time? We're at 12:40. I think I can take another question. Let me see. We've got something from Gia. Okay, Gia, in the situation where you are underpaid compared to your coworkers and you network with coworkers to confirm their pay, how do you position yourself to not expose coworkers when talking with your boss about salary negotiations? Great question. Please do not expose your coworkers and their pay. If it is your legal right to discuss your salary, that is amazing. It is not your legal right to discuss other people's salary. You are not ever, ever, ever legally allowed to say, Robert makes X. You are only legally allowed to say, I make X. Okay? So don't get yourself in any trouble there. Do not share how much your coworkers are making. So in a way, I hope that helps answer your question, because you just should not do it, period. But how do you go about it, right? How do you position yourself to not expose your coworker's salary? You can use code words. If you talk to HR and you find out after talking to your colleagues that you are making less than what they are making, you can say, hey, I've been having discussions in the office and I've recently discovered that I'm underpaid. You do not have to say who the colleagues are. You do not have to say how much the colleagues make. Do not say that. It is illegal. But you can say that you've had conversations in the office. You can say that you've had conversations with people in similar roles. You can say that you've talked to people in your industry in similar roles with similar years of experience in the same, network, and you're not fairly compensated. There are ways that you can go about saying that you've had those conversations without disclosing that you've had it with your coworkers or what their names are. We all want to work together, right? We don't want to get anybody in trouble. And Gia, what I would say to you is if you found out that you're making less than your coworkers and that it's an unfair or underpaid situation, enlist the help of your coworkers. It's easier to work together than it is to work alone or against each other. Ask your coworkers to go talk to HR, and they can also have these conversations and say, hey, I know I'm very happily compensated, but I found out that someone on our team is not. Is there something we can do to bring that up? That conversation that they have with HR might go further than you having that conversation with HR, because they can vouch for you. They can say, Gia is a really great addition to the team. We couldn't function without Gia. Gia does this, Gia does that. If they're not being fairly compensated and now they know, they're gonna leave. We don't want to lose Gia. What can we do to make Gia stay? That is going to go so much further than you going and saying, I talked to my coworkers and I found out I'm making X, So talk to your coworkers and see if maybe you guys can work together to make sure that you're fairly compensated. And one of the things that we hear frequently is people are worried that if they are making more than their colleagues, they don't want to share because they're worried that they'll make less. That is not going to happen. The only people making less are the people that are underpaid. And if they find out that they're underpaid, like you, Gia, you're probably going to be more likely to leave than to stay. If they want you to stay, they better bring you up, okay? So if you talk to your colleagues and you're making less, they're not going to make less because you make less. You can only make more. And everybody starts on an even playing field or a fair playing field based on the different factors that affect pay. But nobody should be starting way below everybody else because of secrecy. It makes no sense. It should only be the factors that affect your pay. If you're making less, it should be because you have less skills or less experience, not because you didn't negotiate for more than Alex, for example. Okay? I hope that answered your question. Oh, George, okay, I'm glad that answered your question. I hope it was helpful. Please talk to your manager. A lot of times these conversations, if you broach them in a respectful way with HR, they are willing to talk to you about this and share what their problems are and maybe an insight into the company that you may not know. But secrecy on both sides helps nobody. Transparency helps everyone. Okay? I think those are all the questions that I'm seeing. Let me check again. Okay, I think that's it. And I think that wraps it up for our workshop. We are at 12:46. Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope this was helpful. As I mentioned, if you did not sign up for this workshop, but you want to get these slides, you want to get all the links I mentioned, please go to our website, salarytransparency.com, go to the links tab, click on the virtual webinar link, and sign up using your name and email there. That will put your email on my email list where I'm about to send the slides, the recording, and all the resources I mentioned to that email list. So if you are not on that email list, please go sign up for it right now or send me an email if you don't get it and I can forward it to you. But I think that about wraps it up for me. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope this was helpful. We're going to be doing these on a monthly basis. So if there's anything else you'd like to see a workshop on, please let me know. I'd love to do more information, different workshops for you all. But thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.